Welcome, everybody. My name is Nicholas Reiner. I'm the Communications Director at the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, and we are so happy to have you here for Our Minds Matter Too, a conversation on mental health, incarceration, and reentry. First off, just want to let you all know that we have, we're here on the Zoom interface, and we're also on Facebook Live. You can submit comments or questions in the chat or in the Q&A box. Please, if you decide to chat, select all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see. Yeah, and I think without further ado, I'll introduce our very special host today. His name is Galen Duncan, and he joins us from the Sacramento Kings, where he is Vice President of Kings Academy and Professional Development. Prior to that position, Duncan spent 10 years as Senior Director of Player Development with the NFL's Detroit Lions, where he advised players on housing options, financial tools, counseling connections, and off-field career opportunities. Duncan spent 6 seasons as a treating clinician for the NFL's program for abuse of substances. Additionally, Galen worked several years as a consulting therapist for the University of Detroit Mercy and Wayne State University Athletics. In his role with Sacramento, Duncan is responsible for implementation of the Kings Academy program, a developmental player-centric curriculum aligning multifaceted organizational philosophies and ideals to help athletes mature into well-rounded professionals. Duncan is involved in the Diversity Awareness Program with the Kings. This program seeks to provide cultural competency and tolerance trainings to players, police officers, community members, and high school teachers and students. Many of these initiatives were derived in the wake of the Stephen Clark killing in Sacramento. A PhD in health psychology and retired United States Army Reserves officer, the Southfield, Michigan native and Lake Superior State alum, played collegiate basketball before securing his master's degree in social work from Wayne State University and PhD in health psychology from Walden University in 2006. We're very grateful to have you with us, Galen, and thank you so much for joining us. And I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Nick. Really appreciate this opportunity to be in front of everyone, and thank you, ARC, for having me on board for what I believe is going to be a wonderful Friday afternoon. Joining me on this illustrious panel are a group of really, really cool people that I've had an opportunity to get to know in this last week, a little bit via the phone and reading their bios and just getting to know them a bit. I know that we're going to have a really good time here. First up, I have Mylrell Miner, who is a student, a writer, a filmmaker. Mylrell is the executive director of Bromont Film Program, a nonprofit which provides reentry services to the formerly incarcerated while giving them a direct pathway into the creative part of the film industry. Thank you for joining us, Mylrell. Blanca Ruiz-Thompson is an advocate and a founder of Brianna's Closet, a nonprofit she founded after the loss of her daughter, Brianna. In collaboration with Angel Hearts, Brianna's Closet creates and donates baby outfits to local hospitals for parents who are fresh into their walk of infant loss, in order to offer love, hope, and understanding on the grief journey on which they are embarking. Blanca was impacted by the criminal justice indirectly and directly at several stages in her life, which has motivated her to bring healthy healing to the at-risk youth in our communities. She has dedicated her life and career to supporting youth and providing the mentorship to stay on the right path. Esteban Nunez was first introduced to civic engagement as and activism at an early age. This foundation forged a pathway to public service, yet a product of California bringing up working class parents. He experienced an array of loss, family issues that led him to seek support and guidance from misguided friends and at-risk environment. Esteban served 6 years of confinement in the California Department of Corrections. Nevertheless, during the 6 years of imprisonment, he took the time to think deeply, to explore his past, and pursue direction of greater purpose. Having thought long and hard about the ways in which his actions had impacted others, Esteban chose to advance himself by pursuing a deepened spiritual life, higher education, and a life of service to others. Upon release, Esteban helped open the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, Sacramento office, where he was first employed as an intern. After his time as an intern mentoring youth in Sacramento Juvenile Hall of Justice and the Department of Justice, he was hired by ARC as a life coach and development assistant. He continues this work to change the narrative of what it means to be formerly incarcerated, now as the state policy director for #Cut50. Esteban has found his greatest purpose and joy in life in the service of others, helping to deepen people's understanding of human condition and in compassion, forgiveness, and redemption. Sara Rodriguez. Serra, formerly incarcerated student pursuing a master's in social welfare degree at UCLA, has admitted that working to obtain her degree has not been easy, and she's had to overcome many obstacles and barriers along her educational path. She's empathetic in the ways that she feels to be marginalized and stigmatized by society, and feels that the sense of duty and privilege to use her experiences, knowledge, and expertise will help her gain favor in navigating academia to assist other formerly incarcerated individuals matriculating to higher education. It is her hope to become a licensed clinical social worker, and after graduation working in corrections, providing a meaningful service to those who are incarcerated. It is wonderful to have these individuals here together all at one time. If you could collectively in the audience give a hand raise and a maybe wave to these folks if they can't see you. You know, I would be remiss not to begin off this conversation with kind of a state of where we are as a world, a nation, and even our community here in Sacramento. The recent events of what have occurred or what has occurred in Minnesota, Georgia, and many other places around the world is definitely a discredit to good people in general. I believe that the targets of being a man of color, not just a Black man or a Black woman, but a person of color, will lead to certain experiences that others may not have. I invite conversation. I invite intertwining what we're doing here on this panel. I invite all those things to become part of this discussion that we have for the next hour. So to get it going, I'm going to start a little bit, and then we're going to go right with Esteban on this first question, but you will likely see other panel members jump in.
Please.
Esteban, studies show that real link between adverse childhood experiences and long-term effects on health and well-being. How do you feel that there's and what is the link between the relevant discussion and mental health amongst current and formerly incarcerated people and the context of our system? How do you feel about that?
So here's what I'll say. Mental health doesn't discriminate, right? It doesn't matter your social class. It doesn't matter your ethnicity. It doesn't matter your race. Anybody can be touched by mental health. We are all susceptible to traumas, and it's the reality of what we live in. To think that you can talk about the criminal justice system without mentioning mental health is just a fallacy. Our criminal justice system has, well, for one, the criminal justice system is not an appropriate solution in dealing with mental health or in dealing with people with mental health. When I went into the system, I of course went through a culture shock of a very different story, but we won't get into it. Went through an entire culture shock. And I learned to openly talk about my own traumas because I knew that was the only way that I would be able to identify how those traumas had influenced my decisions and the poor decision making that I made. And when I was talking openly about it, I noticed that such a high percentage, I want to say it was roughly 95% of the people that I had talked to had experienced similar traumas. But what was disheartening to me is not that they had experienced the traumas, but they had normalized the traumas. And normalize the abusive cycles within their families and intergenerational cycles within their families. And to me, it was wrong. But it really opened my eyes to how influential traumas really are and just how big of a role they've played in our incarceral system, not just with adults, but also with youth. And then sending people who have built this, who have these extensive amounts of trauma into a prison system only exacerbates those traumas. I mean, I experienced more traumas when I was in prison than I have since I've been home. And to think that that is conducive to somebody's rehabilitation is again a fallacy. So I think one, mental health doesn't discriminate. It touches all people. And I think we have to really be having a conversation of how can we be proactive and not reactive in terms of mental health. Like, how can we prevent these traumas from occurring instead of allowing them to occur and then trying to help people after the fact, after the damage has been done.
That makes sense. And, you know, what it seems like is that there's that even more so in our communities, the communities of color, that there's an even further disconnect between those people, you know, addressing traumas and receiving services. Mylrell, I have a question for you in regards to that. What things do you think pose the greatest stigmas for men of color moving into and seeking help from traumas like the ones that Esteban just talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it starts when we're young. A lot of us are introduced through mental health by assignment or through mandatory. And a lot of that stigma comes around it being a more reactive, like he was talking about. And a lot of times we have like the stigma against, for me, is with I had a relationship with mandatory reporters since I was little, and it's like, oh, they just here to take you away or make you feel bad, or it's always mental health always come in an evaluating kind of form, like we're always being evaluated. And I feel as a community, I don't think it kind of resonate with us. It's not seen as a strength, but as like a weakness of a person being weak, seeking mental health or having to go through mental health instead of another tool or asset like other communities think about it as. So as a community as a whole, I think we need to do a better of bringing awareness to where it's about building your life and not always, mental health not always coming in as like a mandatory or assignment. It's always more of a evaluation, and then you followed by a judge, but it's not really voluntary. It's not seen as a strength. So I think those are some of the things we need to kind of like work on, is changing that, how African Americans or males feel about it, because we are always subject to trauma and violence at a high rate, higher than any other demographic, but then we seek mental health at such a low rate and not dealing with those traumas.
You know, interesting that you say that, Mylrell. It's kind of it kind of leads me right into my next question. You know, being a parent and thinking about Blanca and being a passionate mother, Blanca, could you tell us, you know, how you feel about your young person, and how have you dealt with your kids' mental health, and how do you inform them about staying up on taking care of themselves? You know, we're talking about starting this at a young age so they understand that it's important, but how have you managed this process?
Well, the first thing I had to do was realize that my normalizing, like there were so many choices and actions that were normal. It's just what you do. It's like 1, 2, and 3. That one, I had to acknowledge, like, whoa, this is not normal. And then I had to address my pride, my fear, my weaknesses to seek mental help, because it's more, for me, it was more of a pride issue, because I can't carry this. But then when I started seeking healing and help for myself, and then I have children to follow, it is generational. Like, what do I want to pass down to my children? Do I want them to follow me like I followed so many different people in my family, which I have we all have great things we can take from our family, but some stuff that were given to us we didn't want and we don't need. And so with my children, and I started seeing like behavioral issues and erratic emotions that mimicked what I seen in myself, I had 2 choices. I can allow that to go unnoticed or to be criticized or to be negatively labeled. He's a bad kid, they're rude, they just need a whooping, what would be normal. Or I can say, I seen this past, I lost past, let me intervene now so he will understand words that I'm learning: abandonment, fear, sadness, anger, these different emotions that I'm learning not only to recognize and hold space within myself, but then to properly, what is a healthy outlet for them? And so introducing that young to my kids so they can understand, like, I am angry, this is why I'm angry, and how can I express that anger? But then what is under that anger? Because anger is a secondary emotion. And so unfortunately, living in a trauma-filled environment, I have to learn these skills with him. And I go to parenting, and I go to parenting together, because I can't meet his needs if I can't even identify his needs. And the only way I can do that is going outside my normal. And they're going to be strength. My children are going to have so much strength at a young age than I have ever had. And that is what I'm introducing to them. Yeah, now.
That's super awesome. I love it. Kind of bouncing right off of that too, Sarah, being a clinical social worker and working in the field and working with people who are coming back from trauma and are trying to integrate themselves, trying to be parents and trying to do better for their children. Can you tell us a little bit about how your role plays in that, Sarah?
Yeah, so I work with a lot of people coming home, especially those like interested in going into higher education or some kind of educational training. Aside from coming home and having to like reunify with our family, our children, also I think a lot of us seek to answer that like $1 million question: what can I do with a felony? I think a lot of people without lived experience don't really feel confident like advising us so much because they don't really know. So really just trying to organize those of us formerly incarcerated that are going through higher education to kind of really be those spokes people and say, hey, this avenue is available for you. Like I was told from the beginning that I can't go into psychology. I can't, I wouldn't be able to get licensed, but by just pursuing and continuing to talk to folks, now I know people with felonies that are licensed clinical social worker. A lot of times we just need to see that like one person is able to do it to kind of really open our eyes that it is possible.
I'm a strong believer in life experience can lend to being a great teacher. It's interesting that you say that. So now we're trying to catch people younger. We're trying to develop and take away some of the stigma of mental health. Esteban, could you tell us a little bit about how you think that appropriate mental health education could kind of curtail some of the incarceration path of our youth?
Yeah, I mean, I think destigmatizing is going to be is huge, right? But I also think it's who the messenger is that plays a huge role. I've learned, if people had been telling me about mental health prior to me going inside and the importance of traumas and just how influential they were, and I've disregarded all of it because it was, it wasn't it wasn't a trusted source. It wasn't somebody who had lived it and experienced it and kind of just saying, hey, like I see you. When I was going into the schools, into the elementary schools and talking to youth, like I could literally sit down and tell you who had been sexually traumatized as a child because I exhibited those same characteristics, right? And in those conversations, like you really, it's being mindful, right? So I think if we had educational systems, especially in low-income communities, that had teachers that were mindful of the students that were there, I think that would be a huge preventative measure, right? Like just mindful of the students' characteristics, mindful of what they're doing, mindful of their situations at home, and just being mindful and supportive and not belittling, right? And I think again, it goes back to being proactive and not reactive. Like we really have opportunities, and educators really are on the front lines of this to help students build their identities, to help students really find comfort in who they are as individuals, and to help support them and know what a healthy support system looks like and what healthy support feels like. So yeah.
So interesting you say that because, growing up as a man of color, it was often perceived to be weak or be, not cool or we're taught at home, don't go telling your business around to other people type stuff. Mylrell, I'm gonna direct this question towards you. As a young man, what type of person would you have needed to come to you to offer therapy to make it work for you?
It definitely had to not be in a situation where, because like you said, growing up, parents talked about it in our communities about like what you say to like a therapist can like break up your whole family, and that was a burden that a person had to think about when they go to school, when they go to court. When a social worker comes to their house, anytime you come across a mental health professional, you have to really critique what you say based on the stigma that your parents and your grandparents gave you. I definitely I would like to get into somebody that they weren't connected to the system, so it wouldn't have jeopardized me or my family, and somebody that my family would accept it at a young age. Because a lot of times, your mom is sitting over your shoulder while you're talking to somebody, a social worker. They're like, "Ooh, don't say that, don't do that, don't tell them this," and they don't, and your parents don't feel safe, so they're not going to, voluntarily bring you to therapy. It's always court ordered or part of some kind of assessment, when there should be like a middleman or some kind of somebody to introduce your family into the importance of mental health before it's too late, before it becomes mandatory, or you're just going for evaluation. You're only going for a short time because they just need to evaluate you. And then once you get past that, it's like, okay, I'm going to try to avoid mental health until I need it again, until I get in trouble again, until I have a mental breakdown, until I'm assaulted again, and then I'm going to go to this other assigned mandatory until that's over. And then I'm going to go, and it's always going to come under this mandatory assignment kind of thing, when there should be people, the mental health is for the healthy. And that's what people kind of don't understand. It's like, it's not for people that are just, you don't just need it in the times of great trauma. You need it in that in-between time, dealing with the trauma, the aftermath of the trauma. So introducing it in a time where it's not so critical when you're young. So I think that's very important. And having somebody deliver that to us that isn't really a sign, that don't come from a space of like, I have to talk to you, little kid. So,
And to piggyback on that is, we all know what kind of communities, environments we live in. And regardless of what it is, an outsider. An outsider. And so it's hard to send in outsiders into an environment we already don't feel safe. So how are we already unsafe in our natural environment? And then you send an outsider that can potentially harm us. And so I think great, Mylrell said, it was introducing a third party before you get that different form of a CO overlooking your shoulder, and having people that know what we're walking into. Like, we already know when we're walking into, and there's certain words we can use that can already drop people's guard. Oh, because you know the lingo, you know the streets, you know this. And so being able to create that comfortable relationship without that fear, because we already live in some different levels of fear on a constant. So it's really hard to try to offer assistance when it's scary and from a stranger. And I think this is beautiful that we have so many people here on ARC and on our panel that can really, like Esteban, walk into a room full of at-risk youth and know they don't want us there, know that who are these people talking to us. We share our stories, and they're able to feel safe with us because they don't even have to share half the stuff they know. It's because we have either lived it, seen it, and we can relate. And I think that's the earlier and the safer we can create mental health introduction is going to be an amazing impact.
That's a great point, Blanca. I really appreciate that. You kind of stole my thunder because I was about to throw a lob out to the group. It's cool. No, it's perfect. Actually, you set it up. So to lob this to the group, it's like I almost feel like I want to build the perfect therapist and just take that person and drop them into the community. If we're going to build the perfect therapist to change the way our young people see mental health, what does that person look like? Can we maybe as a group drop some words, some special things that person should have to be able to adapt to certain communities?
Swag.
Swag. So Esteban got that. And it's
relatability. Or go ahead,
yes.
Blanca. She could speak
No,
to it way better.
but relatability, like, Esteban knows if he walks into a high school in South Sac all with a tie and a suit, they're going to be like, shh, don't even come in here square. But, Esteban can come in with a shirt, he's sleeved up, and and then they're going to be like, okay, we get you, and unfortunately, our perception is everything. So where are we walking in? Do we look like we're on their level, or do we look like we're authoritarian? And then, I'm just saying because of the circle I'm around in, and the more tattoos you have, sometimes the more better they'll relate to you. You know, like, oh, and it could be unicorns and flowers and something pretty, but there's certain stigmas already that we are changing in the process. But let's be relatable. Let's make sure, like, you got to meet your audience, and the perfect social worker or mental health is going to be perfect for that environment, because you can't drop somebody that's in South Sac or in these underserved schools and drop them off somewhere else, because they're not, they're not going to get the same reaction, and vice versa. So the perfect social worker is somebody that is knowing their population and the kids of the people they're serving, relating, and genuinely connecting, and not like a checklist, because unfortunately there's a checklist social workers or therapists have to just check off.
And I definitely want to add on something to that. It's definitely the type of social workers. I don't think there's a perfect one, but there's just the type. A lot of the times we meet social workers that don't even care, or don't have nothing to do with us. And that's our first introduction to, you can sit across from somebody and realize this person don't care at all. And we don't come across the more passionate social workers, the ones that really know how to deal with trauma. So I don't really care about their background or anything like that. It's just that the person really cares and really invested into the people that they're serving, versus it's always usually a negative experience the first time you deal with somebody in the mental health field. So hopefully we can just deal with people that we can introduce the right person at the right time, or help change the stigma that people already grew up with in their communities of when it comes to mental health.
Yeah. The thing I'll say is, like, just to add on to what they both eloquently stated, I think it comes down to also just quality of care, right? Like, a lot of times people come into contact with therapists and, like, it's very like robotic, right? Like, even in prison, I saw 3 therapists in 6 months, and it's like, okay, I'm not opening up anymore. I'm closed off now, right? And it's so you want a perfect therapist would be somebody who can meet you halfway, who's relatable, who actually cares and takes the time to get to know the person that they're dealing with. And it's like Mylrell said, I mean, a lot of the times you see mental health professionals come in when it's too late, when it's like the trauma's already happened. And now you're trying to almost like accept the trauma and navigate the trauma, but you're having to deal with somebody who's very superficial, but trying to get information out of you to only to their benefit, right? Not to your benefit. And they don't have like your best interests at heart. And I think that's where the disconnect tends to occur.
Sure. So taking it a little step further, you guys are talking about the perfect therapist, and I can kind of envision this person as I see them. You have them in a nice tucked away little office waiting for clients to come in to see them. And of course, all the clients are going to line up right at the door and wait on time. It's not going to happen like that. What are the barriers? What are the things that stop individuals of color, people in these types of situations, from actually getting up and going and seeking the help?
I would say repercussion, or go ahead.
I'll just add quickly, like, our American culture in general kind of views mental health as like a mental illness, and views people that are seeking help as like something's wrong with them, versus like they're just trying to stay mentally healthy. So I think for one, like, having these conversations about like staying mentally healthy, not just when you're going through like traumatic experience and stuff, but just to continue to kind of stay healthy mentally. So.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think the fear of doing things different, like, it's normal. So much is normal, but you have to be that one to reach out, to actually reach out and to be different, and to go to, I think a lot has to do with just the internal fear of, how is this going to really make me look, either to my family, to my community, to my work? And then if it already has like negative repercussions, because like from your childhood, if I, like for me as a mom, if I go and seek services because I postpartum depression, it's not spoke about. I'm not broken. I'm not a failure of a mom or whatever the racing thoughts. I would have to put potential family at risk because I want help. And having that was for me is something that I was like, no, I'm not going to be punished. I need to go ask for help, and I need to ask for it outside of what I'm receiving. Because if I only get what I've been giving, I'm if you keep giving me the same poison, it's always going to be poison. I don't want it no more. So who else can give me something that can benefit me, that will potentially benefit my children, and then it will fall down the line from there. And so I think fear is the biggest thing.
So
and
how do
another
we,
thing,
I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
I mean, another thing too is because mental health is something that people can't really see. People definitely in our communities is a kind of a thing of like, oh, you're struggling with depression, get over it. You're struggling with anxiety, get over it. It's like it's all in your mind. So to them, it's some people is, even though they probably suffer with it too, as simple as like, oh, stop, just just stop it. And that's something that can't happen. It's not true. And I feel like that kind of being more supportive and allow people to have a space to talk about mental health, because that's one thing you can't talk about openly. Like, oh, I'm also successful, I'm working, I have a family, but I'm also depressed, because it instantly adds that sense of like, okay, there's something wrong with this person because they're just not getting over it. And I think like that kind of mindset has to change. This is not something you just get over and just stop.
Absolutely. So maybe some more normalization of services, making them seem more of a cool thing to do, taking that stigma away from individuals who feel like, all the crazy nicknames that we give to people who go seek services. I remember in the 80s, people would say things like, oh, no, I'm not crazy. I'm just trying to get this check. I'm trying to make sure that I get this extra check. Whereas, no, you have a issue that needs to be treated just like if you had the flu, just like if you had diabetes, just like if you had some chronic heart disease that you need to work on as a human being to make yourself better and make yourself well. I think approaching the mind, which is the biggest and strongest organ that we have in our body, and looking at it as a place to start other than a place of weakness. Maybe that's where we need to go. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, just to piggyback off what you said, I feel like one thing that our community kind of misses, mental health is for the healthy. And like the people that I know that are successful in like maintaining definitely high stress situations, all participate in mental health. They all see a counselor. My counselor probably see a counselor. My therapist see a therapist. But those kind of things are not recognized. It's more seen as something for the weak, but not something for the strong. So just kind of like, yeah, all these people are healthy right here. All these people are doing great. They have great jobs, but they all getting mental health services too. It's not just for people that are not, don't look weak or unsuccessful. So just showing that it's strong people that you consider leaders, they're all going through their own mental health struggle. They're all getting help, and that's what makes them healthy, not vice versa.
I go every week, just FYI.
Right? Amen. But I think that is exactly like if we start seeing more people of like higher status or people we look up to, even in our, I could take it back to my own community and the different groups I speak to, and I start talking about going to counseling, going to groups. They'll be like, what? Like, then we totally, like, we already connect with them and then let them know, like, this is how I'm maintaining. This is how I'm no longer there. And so we are a walking, talking testament of the benefits of mental health services, support groups, talk therapy. I'm in the process of a brain spotting, and that's for like severely traumatized individual, which is, there's so many things out there that we need to be comfortable with sharing, because again, it's not a weakness, it's a strength. We cannot strengthen others if we don't share our strength. And so that's just this conversation alone is making it like Sarah. She's formerly incarcerated. She's going to college and she's gonna, go go and save so many people with her life experiences and her education that can support and pull us through it. And Esteban and Mylrell, there's so many of us that, like he said, he goes every week. There's a kid out there that says, what? Esteban? He goes every week? What? Serra? And it's us. And that's how we change the narrative, by changing the narrative.
So I think, Galen, even your example of like going to a doctor when like you have the flu and like things like this. So, but if we apply mental health the same way, like not just going when you are sick, but like we go to the doctors for checkups, we go to the doctors for shots, we go just not when we're suffering with something. We also go like to stay healthy. So until like us as a society starts kind of embracing these things of, oh, you go every week, oh, is that how you're managing stuff? Like just a part of living, and then that will start helping get rid of the stigma attached to it.
Yeah.
And to that, you always need to do like a self-check. Like right now we're going through obviously a lot of stuff in this country, and like I'm just watching somebody get murdered, African American male get murdered, you don't know how that's going to affect you. And sometimes it's really deep, and just trying to just keep that inside and really not dealing with it could be unhealthy for yourself. So that's why it's always good to just check in and have somebody that is a professional to help you, guide you through some of these things, because you don't know how these things are affecting you. Watching somebody in those situations like that.
Right. I'm very proud of where I working for the Sacramento Kings and working in the NBA, because I do feel like our players have been very transparent with their mental health discussions. There's been a ton of papers and interviews given by our noteworthy players who admit to seeing a therapist and admit to practicing good mental health, and the league has offered many resources. I think that's awesome. But the superheroes are in this room. The superheroes are on the ground. The people that they can touch every day, the people in this community can touch every day. Those are the ones I think have to change the stigma and have to bring some normalcy to actually to receiving mental health. What are your thoughts in terms of how people are experiencing the things that are going on like today? So I haven't even watched the video from the gentleman from Minnesota, and I'm not interested in watching it because I know that I'm only going to get increasingly angered by it. I'm wondering what you guys have in thought and feeling about how we can help our young people come to grips with what's going on in this America that we know.
For me, it would be if something like that happens, there got to be a place where we can signal that you can go to talk to somebody. Same thing with COVID, trauma from childhood. But when something happens like this, like that's happening right now, where can we turn to talk to somebody? Like, where can we go? I know ARC provided me with. I used ARC. They had a therapist for me when I needed it. And I still go, I still use aftercare. And it's just like be able to, something happens in society that we can't control. Now that happened, where can we turn? Who can we talk to now? And kind of like highlighting that for individuals. Like, yes, that happened. Yes, that trauma. Don't just go outside and run around or stay on your computer. Seek help. Talk to somebody. Don't just internalize this stuff.
I don't want to go far right or far left on this, but I do have a question. I know there's people who are very upset who during this COVID process have experienced heightened levels of anxiety, depression, fear, and stress, all those things that are related to what our new future looks like. And then we hear these atrocities happening in different communities and things like that. With that being the case, like, what do you suggest for people who want to support the efforts, who want to be in the right in doing things and help the growth of the community, but don't want to in any way affect their own personal freedom or get in some type of trouble, based on their own past incarceration rate? How can those people support? how can they jump in?
Vote.
Vote.
For DAs, for sheriffs, for everything. I mean, that's the thing. It's like nobody really votes for DAs, but it's DAs that are sending us away and our people away, right? I mean, making informed voting decisions. I would say also engaging, you know, in advocacy work with organizations like ARC. I think it's one empowering just to know that you are taking part of in the process. And I also think it brings people comfort knowing that you're not completely powerless, that you are doing something, there's something within your control, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest, a lot of the fear right now is not empowered. There's so much stuff out of our control. And so just being able to identify what can we control, where can I contribute? Because even if you can contribute in some form, you are doing something. And so that can alleviate some anxiety, some fear, because you know, either I just mailed out 50 newsletters to this person or that, or I just did this or just that. There's so much different small roles that need to be filled that can have long-term drastic positive effects. And it's just identifying what you want to take on, where you want to fit in, and just jumping in, you know, advocacy work, volunteering, those that are formerly incarcerated that, you know, don't want to do this or fear, you know, just whatever the limitations are, what is within your realm and what is the best person that get you established so you can do some good. And everybody has a different niche. Everybody has a different gift. You know, some people are very good at just typing and maybe they can do a newsletter. You know, some people are good at speaking. Maybe they could speak. Some people are good at just organizing. They can organize an event and just be totally backseen. But being in some kind of positive input into society can definitely bring some inner peace or some grounding within you, and just definitely like looking at a way to contribute.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely speaking up. Speak up about your mental health and your struggle. I know that helped me a lot. Other individuals from our community that spoke up about their mental health and where they're at in their mental health helped me to speak up about it myself and seek help. I'm like, wow, this person is doing pretty good, but they're out there speaking about their mental health. So I need to also check on it myself. So it's like, definitely that's a safe way, like speak about it and create safe spaces. Because like you said, like a lot of us have criminal records, and we want to be more active, but we don't get the same liberty that other people get being active about stuff that's going on. But you can always create a safe space, always listen to somebody, and always speak up about your mental health and how important it is. Because you don't know who that's going to affect and help.
Right. Awesome stuff, man. You know, so I wonder, you know, we talk about individuals who have come out and want to help and want to do good. How important do you guys feel, and this may be a Sarah question to initial, but how important do you feel about the individual offering treatment to have had some experience maybe being incarcerated themselves?
I think it's super important. We always got to watch our like counter transference with the client and make sure we're not over relating and imposing that on them. But just to be able to have that experience, it lets us kind of understand the need a little bit more and possibly even like think outside the box a little bit where it comes to like providing interventions and also like connecting them to resources. We ourselves are more connected to the communities. So we're able to then pass that on to like the clients that we work with as well. So I think that, and also just being able to identify and understand, like Esteban was talking about, like understand the impact of trauma, generational trauma, these type of things. So it just offers a deeper understanding. And that's what like I love about ARC is that it's really given us all that platform to be able to like be a part of groups with one another, be able to learn from each other's experiences. As something that like us as a social worker, we're supposed to be creating these spaces for people to be able to share their narratives, share their stories, learn from each other's experiences, successes and also failures, to normalize like failures and also like share successes and disseminate that information. So I think it's super important.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredibly important. In fact, when I came home, I went I do therapy once a week. When I first came home, I was going twice a week. And I found a therapist, I was very adamant on this, found a therapist who had some experience with incarceration. Like, it didn't mean he had to be formally incarcerated, but his older brother was incarcerated. So to me, it kind of allowed me an opportunity to get insight on what it was like for my younger brother to have to come visit me in prison. And it also gave me the comfort of knowing, like, okay, I can open up and I'm not going to be judged, you know, about my past to him. And I can talk about, you know, the guilt that I carry, and he'll understand, you know. So I think it's incredibly important to have that.
So we have about 5 minutes left, and you know, this has gone amazingly fast. And I knew it would because of the quality of individuals we have on this panel and the level of understanding of a very important topic. But I'm going to play off my girl Sarah's transference statement. Because all of you are agents for change. All of you are people who are in this to make a greater world and a better peace amongst all people. What is the counter transference that you feel? Because I want to end this on a positive note. The counter transference, or the good feeling you have about doing good behind what you're involved in. And I'm going to give each panelist about a minute to do that. We're gonna start with Esteban.
Oh, don't start with me. Honestly, you know, I did a post. I've been home 4 years now. It was guilt that used to drive me into this work. Guilt of the people I left behind. Now it's really just the joy and the happiness that I've seen from people come home, just being able to watch them rebuild their lives and build a life for themselves. And some of them were told that they would never even get to come home, but to see them come home and flourish, that's the motivation for me. Like, that's what gives me just the energy and the endurance to continue, because this is hard work. It's very taxing. It's very demanding. It's very sporadic, but it's definitely worth it. It's worth every second of it.
Okay, Sarah, you're up next.
Okay, so for me, kind of like the same thing. Also, just being able to share, like, the ways that we are able to connect, and I can relate to the people that I work with and other people with lived experience, being able to share those resources to them, and being excited about that. I know a lot of times we go around searching for answers, such as, like, what can I do with a felony? And we can't really, it's hard to find those answers unless we're really working with organizations or working with people with lived experience, because to us, that question is something that's always going to be answered. Even now, as I go through to hopefully become licensed in the next couple of years, like, I know I have examples of people who've went through it and are successful, but does that necessarily mean it'll transfer over to my situation? I hope so, and I'm going to give all my effort to doing so, but nothing is ever 100% guaranteed. So just being able to be excited to be able to share that with others, and know that I'm providing something that probably they haven't been provided by other people, just because they're not constantly living with trying to answer that question.
All right, Blanca.
You're muted, Blanca.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So for me, what I get out of it, there was a defining point that I believe in my early adolescence. If I had somebody to share with me, change some of my thought patterns, or the normalcy of some of my choices, that would have been a drastic, like, catalyst for a whole different future. So what I'm getting out of it is I'm able to walk into rooms where I see kids that I know the pain and the hurt and the stuff they're carrying, and just being me, not like I'm all great, but like, our traumas are not mine. Like, I'm not the only one with this. I'm not the only one with this pain and these thoughts. So if everything that was negatively spoken about me, I'm taking that power back. Oh, you're a felon? Yeah, I have a felony. I'm a mother. I'm a healer. I'm going to change the narrative to every negative comment that was placed on me. And I'm walking into these rooms where these kids are still, my heart is with the at-risk youth. These kids are carrying these labels. And so I'm going to empower them and help change their future, because generational changes are real. And so what better ways to change them is to go to the unformed individuals that have life choices still, that I can help. Even if I can't change them, I can plant a seed that they can always rely and come back on. And that's something I get out of, that I carry, is that we have a voice. And I came home from prison to try to find my voice, and organizations like ARC empowered me as an adult, as a woman. Why not empower our youth? Why not empower my children? And we are the ones to go back. And that is what I get out of it, because changing one kid's future, you will change that line of that family forever. And that is amazing to me. And that's my goal. And that's what I get out of it, is nobody will have to walk this path because I already did it. And so how can we change that path or empower you while you're walking it? And that is something that I really take away with me, is my past struggles. You're not going to use it to harm me no more. I'm going to use it to empower people. And that's something beautiful. That is so amazing, to come from a life of incarceration and trauma to be empowered-less. We're not we're powerless, to come home and be empowered by that same abuse and that same trauma. And so, yeah, we're giving our power back.
Love it. I love it. Mylrell.
I mean, yeah, for me, mental health is important, and it not only helped me deal with the hard times, but it actually helped me be able to enjoy the better times in my life. Being healthy make you recognize the positive that you have after you return home. And I kind of like want to help spread that out and help other people that has helped me. I definitely know, for me, it's not just about, I make films, and it's not just about making films. It's about shining light on these stigmas and what's wrong with our community, and helping like bring it to the forefront and speak about it. And that's what brings me joy. But I really want to commend everybody on the panel, everybody a part of ARC, that they spoke about their mental health problems, and they really create a safe space for me. And I love that. And I'm trying to do the same thing. That does bring me joy. And being happy to be able to love my family, mental health, love my family more, love myself more. And just recognize that mental health is for the healthy, and is not something that should be, stigmatized at all. So,
this is just absolutely amazing. I don't have any better words for this than that you guys give me hope that this world can change in so many wonderful ways, and that this world can be a great place for all of us, and that we can all get our mental health, that we can all find some gratitude in the fact that we are afforded those civil liberties of having mental health, and to be able to effectively communicate those things and just feel better in general. We're kind of at the end here. We have we would be remiss if we didn't leave you guys with some materials and some things you can look at. But inside of that, my experience with ARC, the first one was when we went to the prison and played a basketball game and did some great things. But man, what an incredible experience to be here on this call with you guys today. It just further, proves to me that ARC is a strong commitment to this community. And if there's any way that I can support what you guys do throughout the process of being the great people that you are, I'm right here for you. Thank you to my panelists. You guys were great. You wouldn't believe that this is the first run we did through this. You guys are awesome. We should do this again. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for hosting this. Thank you, ARC, for putting it together. And thank you, everybody, for your input.